Welcome, curious listeners, to The Deep Dive. Today, we're diving into something truly mind-bending, the ethics of potential extraterrestrial contact. Just imagine for a second. What if, maybe soon, we actually detect life out there? How would we even start talking to it? Or figure out what it wants? And maybe the biggest question, what do we owe it? Morally, I mean. Or what do we owe ourselves, our planet, in that kind of situation? It's huge.
It really is. And it's not just sci-fi anymore, is it? It feels like something that could be, well, just around the corner. So for this deep dive, we've got this great stack of sources you provided. Really fascinating stuff. And our mission today is pretty clear. We want to pull out the key ideas, the really important bits of knowledge from these materials. We need to identify the core ethical questions, the dilemmas, and look at the arguments, for and against doing certain things.
Exactly. Like, should we tell everyone immediately? Or keep it quiet? Should we be shouting hello into space? Or just listening? We'll also look at any protocols people have suggested for this and think about the massive long-term impacts contact could have on everything. Society, how we think, even spirituality. And then, we'll leave you with some questions to chew on. The sources are really varied. Philosophy, astrobioethics, even some personal accounts. It's going to be a rich discussion. Okay, let's unpack this. Right, let's start with this idea that contact might be closer than we generally think, and how that view is changing fast. I mean, the scale of space, it's almost impossible to really grasp, isn't it? One source mentions Lineweaver's calculation, something like 10 to the power of 20 Earth-like planets just in the observable universe. Mind-boggling. But even with numbers like that, predicting when first contact might happen is, tricky.
It's incredibly hard.
Yeah.
Yet some of these sources are suggesting maybe within the next 5 to 20 years, which sounds incredibly soon. And it's not just a wild guess. It's tied to how fast our technology is moving. Things like machine learning, much better remote sensing. We're just getting way better at looking for technosignatures.
Technosignatures, right. The signs of technology out there, whether they're meant for us or not. And what's really interesting is how the old assumptions about what alien life could be or what it could do are being challenged.
Exactly. We used to think, well, temporal relativity makes interstellar flight basically impossible for biological life, right? The distances, the time dilation. Or we'd assume the journey would just take longer than any creature could live. But these sources are saying maybe those limits only apply if you think like a human or like current Earth biology. The big insight here is, what if extraterrestrial life, ETL, isn't planetary? What if it's nomadic, living in space itself?
Or post-biological. That's where it gets really wild, isn't it? Engineered life, AI forms that wouldn't care about time dilation or short lifespans. Imagine the source mentions things like data dumping remotely through subspace buoys, like near instant information across vast distances.
Yeah, totally bypassing light speed limits for information transfer. Or maybe they could just shut down certain non-essential systems for incredibly long trips, a kind of deep hibernation for potentially thousands, millions of years. It just blows the possibilities wide open, what life is, how it travels, how it communicates.
It really does. But that brings up another problem, doesn't it? If the possibilities are that wide, the challenge shifts. It's not just finding a signal, it's knowing what you found.
Right.
Recognition.
Precisely. Stanislaw Lem's novel, Fiasco, it's mentioned in the sources. It used to feel like satire, but now, maybe not so much. Lem wrote, "The greater the number of theories astrophysics had at its disposal, the more difficult it became to prove the authenticity of an intentional signal." Unquote. The more ways we can imagine contact happening, the harder it is to be sure any specific signal is the real deal. Is it intentional? Is it even life? What does it mean?
It's a huge interpretation problem. The sources even touch on this. Maybe we can convey simple ideas like numbers, prime numbers, just like talking to animals. But abstract concepts, peace, culture, that's a whole different ballgame.
A massive challenge. Okay, so that's the possibility space widening. What about us, our human baggage? How do our own tendencies color how we think about this?
Yeah, let's get into that. One source dives deep into this thing called the Hobbesian trap. It comes from Thomas Hobbes, the philosopher. His idea was basically, we're all roughly equal in our ability to harm each other. Even the strongest can be taken down by the weakest with some planning, right? And Hobbes thought this leads to constant competition, especially when we want the same thing that can't be shared. Fear, mistrust.
The state of nature, where life is solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short, or as the source puts it, continual fear and danger of violent death. And this source applies that grim picture to a potential proximal first contact situation. Basically asking, would we just fall into that same pattern of fear and potential conflict with ETI? project our own history onto them.
It's a worrying thought,
Mm.
but the paper actually pushes back against that assumption. It argues that ETI wouldn't necessarily fall into that same trap, that same kind of game theory logic. Specifically, they might not choose a risk-dominant strategy.
Right. Let's unpack that a bit. A risk-dominant strategy is, well, it often feels like the safer individual choice, but it leads to a worse outcome for everyone involved if both sides choose it. Think of the Cold War arms race or the game of chicken. Both sides trying to avoid the worst outcome for themselves individually, but ending up in a collectively bad, potentially catastrophic situation. Mistrust breeds conflict.
So what's the implication here? Humans.
Yeah.
Yeah, we often default to those risk-dominant strategies. We push things to the brink. But the argument in the source is that long-lived ETI civilizations, the ones advanced enough for interstellar travel, are probably less likely to be aggressive.
Why? Because aggression, especially at a high-tech level, tends to be consumptive. It burns through resources, creates instability, leads to self-destruction. Civilizations wired that way probably wouldn't last long enough to become interstellar travelers. They'd wipe themselves out first.
So survival itself might select against that kind of aggression over cosmic timescales.
That's the idea. It's an argument from efficiency. To survive for millions of years, to manage resources on an interstellar scale, aggression is just inefficient. It's unsustainable. Cooperation, knowledge sharing, peace. The payoff for that becomes much higher in the long run. So the game changes. It stops being a scary dilemma where conflict seems rational and becomes almost trivial. Cooperation is the obvious, logical choice for long-term survival.
That fundamentally flips the script on the scary alien invasion trope, doesn't it? It suggests advanced ETI might be, well, likely benevolent or at least non-aggressive out of sheer necessity.
It challenges our assumptions based on our own, often messy, human history. It asks us to imagine a more evolved form of rationality.
Okay, that's a hopeful angle.
Yeah.
But another source presents a more challenging perspective on humanity itself. The idea that we are the problem, that humanity is stuck in a prolonged adolescent phase.
Yeah, that's a stark way to put it. Chaotic, rebellious, immature, not ready for the galactic stage, basically. And from that viewpoint, if ETI were watching us objectively, they'd have reasons to be concerned. Serious reasons.
The source even claims, and this is based on testimony presented in the material, that ETI have already intervened, taken actions to contain some of our efforts, clipped our wings as we've tried to weaponize space.
Right. And importantly, this isn't framed as hostility. It's described as an enlightened act of compassion, like a parent stopping a child from playing with matches near a gas can, preventing us from harming ourselves and potentially others. It suggests a kind of quarantine. We're seen as too primitive, too violent.
Wow. Examples mentioned are specific, like allegedly stopping an ICBM test aimed at the moon or taking nuclear missiles offline.
Yeah, taking 16 intercontinental ballistic missiles offline. These are presented as specific incidents, messages saying, don't go down this path. The implication is clear. Our current state global conflict, the drive to weaponize space, is seen as a major roadblock to open contact.
So the key to being welcome in the cosmos is peace, as the source puts it. We need to grow up first.
That seems to be the core message from that perspective. Advanced civilizations, perhaps ones that don't even have a concept of war anymore, would see our behavior as incredibly risky, too dangerous to let loose in the universe until we sort ourselves out. It puts the onus squarely back on us.
Okay, so with those possibilities and our own potential immaturity laid out, let's dig into the really tough ethical knots. First up, disclosure. If contact happens or if proof emerges, who gets to know and when? Full transparency right away, or something more controlled?
Huge question, and there are strong opinions on both sides in our sources. One view, strongly argued by Dr. Stephen Greer, is for immediate, full public disclosure, no holding back. His position is based on the belief that ETI presence is real and that understanding it, including their potential technologies, could actually help us fix our own messes. You know, the human-caused global crisis.
Climate change, resource depletion, all of it.
Potentially. Greer's mantra seems to be, the truth shall set you free. He argues transparency is vital for humanity to evolve, to stop the destructive patterns and join the cosmic community. It's framed as a political necessity, demanding an end to alleged secrecy.
Okay, so that's the argument for openness. But the sources also describe a very different narrative, one of deliberate suppression, a cover-up.
Yes, a quite detailed and disturbing narrative. It alleges a shadow government, an illegal rogue break-off group operating outside normal oversight. This group, described as transnational and unaccountable, is accused of keeping the hidden truth and forbidden knowledge secret for well, decades. The claims are that they manipulate media, stage fake alien encounters, think scary ones, and push a false alien threat narrative.
Why? What would be the purpose of faking a threat?
According to the sources, it's primarily to justify militarizing space, to get funding for space weapons, consolidate power, and protect massive financial interests tied to existing energy and propulsion systems. We're talking hundreds of billions a year, allegedly. The narrative even claims that people within the UFO research community, like abduction researchers or media figures, are either co-opted or blacklisted. The goal, supposedly, is to make sure only the terrifying tales, the Independence Day scenarios, get mainstream attention. Anything suggesting benevolent ETI or alternative narratives gets shut down.
That's a pretty extreme claim. Is there any suggestion of why someone would go to such lengths beyond power and money?
Well, one of the most chilling parts of this narrative is the alleged underlying motive for some key figures within the supposed covert group. It's described as an eschatological worldview, meaning a belief system focused on the end times. The claim is that some individuals actually want to hasten global catastrophe to bring about a second coming or similar end times prophecy. This madness, as the source calls it, is presented as the ultimate driver for the extreme secrecy and the manufactured threat narrative. It explains why even high-level officials might be kept in the dark if they don't share this specific outlook.
Wow. Okay. That is a lot to take in. Shifting gears slightly, but still on communication. Let's talk signaling. Do we actively try to contact ETI or do we just listen? SETI versus METI, another big ethical minefield.
Absolutely. Let's be clear on the terms first. SETI, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, is passive. We're listening for signals they might be sending, intentionally or not, like the work done at Berkeley SETI Research Center. METI, messaging extraterrestrial intelligence, is active. We deliberately beam powerful messages out there, trying to get a response. These are fundamentally different approaches, ethically speaking. Each has unique risks and implications.
It definitely feels riskier to shout into the cosmic darkness, doesn't it? Announcing our presence to, well, who knows what. The potential downside, even if it's a tiny chance, could be enormous, existential even.
That's the core concern. The potential harm is seen as serious enough, even when it is extremely unlikely, especially because it affects everyone, future generations included. It's intergenerational and global. Who gets to make that bet for all of us?
But is it a new risk? Don't some argue we've been leaking signals for ages anyway?
That's the counter-argument, that METI adds no new type of risk. Humanity's been broadcasting radio, TV, relatively weak signals for about a century. And we also send out stronger transmissions for things like radar, asteroid tracking. Whether that leakage is actually detectable over interstellar distances is debated. The science is unsettled, as one source puts it. But the point is, maybe the cat's already out of the bag. So METI isn't revealing our existence for the first time, just shouting louder.
Okay. Then there's this other approach mentioned, the CE5 protocols. That sounds very different.
Very different. CE5, Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind, specifically human-initiated contact. Developed by Dr. Greer, these protocols apparently involve meditation, focusing conscious intent, basically inviting ETI to show up peacefully. And the sources claim these have resulted in encounters witnessed by multiple people at once, suggesting something beyond just technology.
So contact through consciousness, not just radio waves.
That's the implication, that ETI might be responsive to peaceful intent, maybe on a non-local consciousness level. It's a radical departure from traditional SETI-METI debates. And these actions are described as deliberately bypassing the national military command structures, aiming for peaceful contact outside official, potentially militaristic channels.
Which brings us back to that tension, the alleged ETI interventions, clipping our wings. The example cited destroying a missile aimed at the moon, taking ICBMs offline. If true, that's direct interference.
Seen by proponents as a clear message, though, don't go down the path of mutually assured destruction. Stop playing with nuclear fire. Stop weaponizing space. It implies ETI are not just watching, but actively managing us, or at least trying to nudge us away from our most destructive tendencies to ensure life here survives.
What stands out to you here, it feels like this deep conflict within humanity itself, our drive to reach out, maybe even peacefully, like CE5, versus this drive to control, dominate, weaponize, and a potential cosmic referee stepping in.
That tension is palpable throughout the sources. Humanity's aspirations versus its apparent limitations. And because of all this, the risks of METI, the possibility of non-standard contact, the alleged interventions, there's a strong call for much broader input on these decisions. Not just astronomers. We need philosophers, anthropologists, social scientists, policy experts, everyone involved in figuring out best practices for messaging, if we do it. The sources argue it's not black and white, not silence versus shouting. Reasonable people can pursue alternatives. We need a nuanced global conversation.
Okay, let's move to another fundamental ethical layer. If we do make contact, what are our moral obligations to them? Do ETI have rights? One source calls this the axiom of moral respect. How far does that respect extend?
It's a core philosophical question. To what extent are ETI moral patients beings deserving respect? The sources argue pretty strongly that if ETI show signs of personhood, autonomy, consciousness, rationality, then yes, they qualify. And if they are persons, then it would be deeply wrong, inappropriate, and wrong to experiment upon them without their consent nor otherwise harm them, unless obviously we were in a state of war. It sets a very high ethical standard from the outset.
And this line of thinking gets extended, even drawing parallels to how we treat animals on Earth.
Yes, using examples like dolphins, acknowledging their intelligence. Some argue all non-human animals should be encompassed, without exception, in our ethical codes. So if we met ETI that were, say, intellectually inferior to humans, a tricky concept, but let's go with it, our responsibility might be similar to how we should treat animals. A balance between potential instrumentalist values, using them for our benefit, which is controversial even with Earth animals, and recognizing their intrinsic values, respecting them, preventing suffering, preserving their species.
It forces us to confront our own inconsistencies here on Earth, doesn't it? Our double relationship to our inferiors, as the source puts it.
Absolutely. And then, well, then it gets really expansive.
Yeah, this is where it got really interesting for me. Applying intrinsic value even to microorganisms. How did that work?
It's acknowledged as problematic, practically speaking. We kill microbes constantly just by existing, but the idea is to foster a deeper respect for life itself in all its forms, to capture this other value beyond just usefulness or intelligence. It's about trying to mollify our worst environmental excesses by cultivating a sense of reverence for life. Terms like teloempathy, empathy for any life with a purpose or direction or biorespect, are floated. It's pushing towards a universal ecological ethic.
But doesn't that lead to impossible choices?
Yeah.
The paradox of inclusion.
Exactly. That's the major challenge highlighted. If everything has intrinsic value that can't be compromised, how do you ever make a decision when values conflict? Human exploration versus Martian microbes, for example. If both have intrinsic value, who's right wins. It makes prioritizing incredibly difficult and shows the limits of simply extending current ethics without deeper thought. We need new ways to navigate these conflicts.
Okay, shifting slightly, what ethical foundations might we expect from ETI themselves, assuming they're advanced?
The sources suggest some likely universals based on evolutionary pressures. Any advanced ETI would almost certainly need a concept of harm. You don't build a lasting civilization without understanding cause, effect, and danger. They'd also need a capacity for communication, obviously. Even if it's totally alien to us, quantum entanglement, magnetic fields, who knows?
And they'd need to understand consequences, right? Learn from mistakes.
Yes, some sort of consequentialism. Recognizing actions have outcomes is fundamental to learning and survival. And likely, sociality, abstract thought, planning, technology. These usually arise from social interaction, cooperation, individual minds working together. So expect individuals within a social structure.
Then there's this idea of a natural law ethics introduced.
Yeah.
One that's aligned with the universe itself.
Right, a fascinating concept. This ethical framework suggests the universe isn't neutral. It has inherent tendencies, maybe even goals expressed through life. The primary goal being to increase the overall amount of life in the universe. And interestingly, it posits that humanity is uniquely suited to help with this goal.
So we have a cosmic purpose to spread life.
That's the implication. We face a choice. Help the universe in its pro-life efforts, or choose the way of death, opposing life, destroying it, acting selfishly. Choosing destruction is seen as anti-human and anti-universe, ultimately self-defeating. It frames our ethical choices on a truly cosmic scale, linking our actions to the fate of life itself.
Okay, we've wrestled with some huge ethical questions. Now let's look at the more practical side. What rules or guidelines actually exist or are being proposed for handling all this? We have to start with existing space law, right? Stuff hammered out decades ago.
Definitely. The 1967 UN Outer Space Treaty is the bedrock. It lays down fundamental principles, like space being used exclusively for peaceful purposes, a direct reaction to Cold War fears, but still crucial, and the requirement for states to avoid harmful contamination of space and other celestial bodies, plus the idea of astronauts as envoys of mankind.
Representing all of us, not just one nation.
Exactly. And Articles 6 and IX are key for astrobiology ethics. They're the foundation for planetary protection. This is a big deal managed by bodies like CUSPAR and NASA. It's about preventing forward contamination. Us accidentally seeding Mars with the Earth microbes, for example, ruining science or harming potential native life. And also back contamination, the Andromeda strain scenario, bringing something dangerous back to Earth. This isn't just theory anymore. With Mars missions, private and public, becoming reality, these planetary protection protocols are getting very urgent, very real.
Okay, so basic protection is covered. But what about more active engagement? Frameworks for interaction.
Yes, the sources propose moving beyond just prevention. One idea is the axioms of first contact. This tries to build a more complete groundwork for both post-detection protocol and rules of engagement. It's based on those principles we discussed earlier: moral respect, understanding evolution, sociality, harm, communication, and having a clear decision-making process.
Sounds comprehensive. Are there others?
There's also the astroethics of responsibility. This one poses three big questions for humanity to answer. Who are we? What do we value? What should we do? Answering these honestly, the idea goes, leads us towards a galactic common good. Extending our moral circle beyond Earth to everything we can influence in space, it's about taking responsibility for our cosmic neighborhood.
And I remember seeing a golden rule of space exploration.
Yes, a simpler, powerful principle. Space exploration must be carried out in a way so as to reduce, not aggravate, tensions in human society. Basically, don't let our activities in space make conflicts on Earth worse. Use space to foster cooperation, not competition.
That makes sense. Now, what about actually meeting ETI? Is there a protocol for, well, vetting them?
One source proposes something called the Goldilocks evolutionary sequence. It's framed as a potential protocol for negotiating and assessing interstellar visitors. It outlines observable signs to look for signs of social complexity, intelligent behavior, ethical reasoning. For instance, can they think abstractly? How are they structured socially? Do they learn? It even suggests a clever test for culture, seeing if they attach arbitrary meaning to objects or symbols, like humans do, because that signals complex thought. It's an attempt to gauge their maturity level, basically. Are they past their own adolescent phase?
Fascinating. Okay, looking ahead. Contact, or even just the serious possibility of it, would obviously have huge long-term impacts. But the sources also warn about very immediate negative impacts related to our current activities in space, environmental and military threats.
Yes, stark warnings. The Kessler syndrome, for one. The nightmare scenario where space debris starts a chain reaction of collisions, making low Earth orbit unusable, trapping us on Earth, essentially. And then there's the escalating risk of satellite wars. Nations targeting each other's critical satellites, communication, navigation, spy satellites. The consequences on Earth could be catastrophic.
And this ties back to the alleged secrecy and militarization narrative.
Explicitly, the sources detail massive black budget spending on space weapons-directed energy, hypersonics. A full-blown hypersonics race is mentioned, and this buildup is directly linked in these sources to that manufactured false alien threat narrative, using a fake external enemy to justify internal military expansion into space.
So what really stands out to you here, it feels like we're creating the exact dangers that the quarantine idea suggests ETI might be trying to prevent us from unleashing.
It's a deeply ironic and worrying feedback loop, isn't it? Our fear and aggression potentially fueling the very behaviors that might keep us isolated, leading to more fear and aggression. We could be heading towards self-destruction, fulfilling the negative prophecy.
Is there a proposed way out of this cycle?
The sources argue strongly for transcending our current tribalism. There are calls for robust political institutions, even suggesting a federal world government might be necessary. The idea is, only through global cooperation and governance can we manage space peacefully, prevent interplanetary conflict, and redirect resources. Shift spending from weapons to useful and life-supporting things. Secure a shared future instead of fighting over fragments.
That kind of global unity feels like a prerequisite for the more transformative potential of contact, doesn't it?
Absolutely. That positive transformation is the flip side. Contact and the enlightenment it could bring are seen as catalysts, moving humanity finally out of that adolescent phase into maturity. A future of universal peace, abundance, the abolition of ignorance, the end of disease, and widespread personal enlightenment. It's a truly utopian vision.
What would that actually look like according to the sources?
Things like decentralized, clean energy, ending resource scarcity, a different economic model, maybe a globe of villages, empowered local communities, less centralized control, breakthroughs in medicine, curing major diseases, extending healthy lifespans dramatically. And a spiritual shift, too, moving away from rigid chauvinistic dogma towards a more genuinely humble universal spirituality. A recognition that truth is one, underlying all genuine paths.
But it's not automatic, right? We have to choose this.
Crucially, yes, it requires human free will collective action, a conscious choice to embrace peace, cooperation, and enlightenment over fear and conflict. The ultimate vision, humanity becoming a true interstellar species, finally welcomed into the family of planetary societies. Earth transforming into a beacon of enlightenment throughout the cosmos. It's presented as our potential destiny. Achievable, beautiful, but demanding a profound shift in how we live and think right now. Hashtag outro.
Wow. Okay. We have covered an incredible amount of ground in this deep dive, just so many layers to the ethics of extraterrestrial contact. We went from the sheer possibility, maybe even probability of life out there and how that's challenging our old ideas, to the really thorny ethics of disclosure, signaling, moral rights for everything from microbes to maybe post-biological AI.
And we didn't shy away from the darker aspects, either the alleged cover-ups, the very real dangers of space militarization, the idea that our own adolescence might be the biggest barrier.
Exactly. But also that hopeful vision of transformation, if we can navigate these challenges, if we can choose peace and unity, really brings home that this isn't just abstract speculation. Our choices now about conflict, technology, transparency, they matter on a cosmic scale.
They absolutely do. They could determine whether we remain confined or whether we truly join a larger universal community.
So, to keep you thinking about all this, here are a few discussion questions, trying to capture some of the tensions we found in the sources. First, we heard about potentially benevolent ETI, like in Greer's view, but also about humanity's tendency towards conflict, the Hobbesian trap idea. If our own self-destructive behavior, like weaponizing space, is really what's keeping ETI away, the quarantine idea, what concrete steps could humanity take, beyond just treaties, to truly demonstrate we're ready for peaceful, open contact? How do we prove we've grown up?
Second, granting moral rights is complex. We talked about a spectrum from microbes to advanced ETI, leading to that paradox of inclusion. How could frameworks like the axiom of moral respect or the galactic common good actually work in practice? If preserving a unique Martian microbe conflicts directly with vital human interests, say colonization for survival, how do you ethically resolve that paradox where both seem to have intrinsic value?
Third, the sources allege a shadow government spreading disinformation, a false alien threat to fuel militarization. What ethical duties do scientists, journalists, and ordinary citizens have in sorting truth from lies in this area? And how does this internal human conflict over the narrative itself weaken our ability to respond rationally and ethically if genuine contact did occur?
And fourth, ETI might be radically different, post-biological, nomadic, communicating in ways we can't imagine. How do our human-centered, anthropocentric, or even reason-centered, ratio-centric biases limit our ability to even detect, let alone ethically engage with, such truly alien intelligence? Could we even apply something like that Goldilocks sequence or a test for culture if their entire way of being is fundamentally different?
Those are some deep questions to ponder.
And maybe one final thought to leave you with. If the cosmos is full of life, and some of it is incredibly ancient, wise, having overcome the kinds of problems we struggle with, what does their existence imply about our potential? Does it create a kind of moral imperative for us to evolve ethically, spiritually, not just technologically, so we can finally become those envoys of mankind the Outer Space Treaty talked about?
A profound question indeed. It really invites us to look both outwards and inwards. This deep dive might be ending, but hopefully, for you, the thinking and the conversation are really just getting started. We encourage you to keep exploring. Thanks for joining us on the deep dive.